evening and welcome to tonight's driver's ed class. I am sure that people will be a little bit late coming in today after a long vacation break. So we're going to give you a minute or two to sign in. So remember to sign in on your phone. Text me that you're here. Also put your name on the comment section so I can see who is watching tonight. Wow, 11 people popped right on. Look at that. That's awesome. So let's get all signed in and ready to go. It's not that often that I go a week without having a classroom, so it's been kind of a different 10 days, although I did get to drive with a lot of you over vacation, which is good. So good evening, good evening. Perfect. Glad to see everybody. Oh, the music's too loud, thanks. Let me turn that down a little bit. All right, we're getting there. I knew that we were going to have two people that weren't going to be able to make it for tonight. So, all right. I think we have just about enough to start going. And like I said, remember, attendance on your phone. Text in that you're here. So I'm looking at the computer screen, seeing that we've got 15 people. So we're just about right where we need to be. So let's get right into where we left off. Before we do that, I do want to explain a few things that are going on at the moment. Back last week, I was in contact with someone that had COVID. So I am doing the cautionary quarantine. I have taken a test. I will get the results in the next day or two. I have felt perfectly fine, but the protocol that the school requires is that if you are direct contact, you have to be quarantined and then get a test result. So I am in the process of getting results, hopefully by Thursday. I think they should probably be in, and then we'll actually try to, oh, it's my voice. How about that? David's the one that's giving me, yeah. I unplugged everything during vacation, and I just plugged it back in. Tell me if the voice is much better. So I'm hoping I've just tuned it up a little bit. And let me get rid of the music so we can stop that. So I'm not scheduling for tomorrow, but Thursday, we'll schedule tomorrow at class time. And I'll be waiting for the results, and then we'll go from there. The school nurse has taken down a list of people that I had driven with on Friday or Saturday. So if the nurse did not get in contact with you, you were after the person that was in the vehicle. So hopefully everybody's feeling fine. And we'll get through this. It's just the nature of being in this time period of COVID that it spreads mysteriously. And we want everyone to be healthy, and we don't want anybody to feel ill, and we do not want to spread that around. So we'll take precaution. So with that being said, let's get right into where we left off. Some of you still haven't done the sheet, the worksheet. Remember, you can go onto Facebook, our remote Facebook page, and download. Remember, there are 2 sheets that I would like you to do, and that is going to get you familiar with the different controls that we have in a vehicle. Very important to understand that with symbols, not only will the symbol be communicating something to you, the color of the symbol. So a symbol that is red needs our immediate attention. Something that is yellow means that it's activated, and anything that is energy related like in a hybrid sense, will be green that is being utilized. Now, there are two terms that we did not go over, and the two terms that I want to kind of go over quickly tonight before we get into tonight's topic of safety equipment. So, tonight we'll be basically talking about seatbelts, airbags, and um, helmets. The terms that I want you to write down and be familiar with is registration. Now, here is just a common um, item that should be written down and remembered, that you should always have your license and registration with you at all times. So most of the time, the registration we never take a look at. It's your license that tends to be left in another pocket, in another purse, not on you. Now, I want you to realize, if you ever do get stopped for driving without a license, you do have, I believe, 24 to 48 hours to prove proof that you actually have your physical license. Now, just giving the police officer your name and your birth date, he can look it up in a computer and he basically knows whether you're licensed or not. But the state does indicate that to drive a motor vehicle, you have to have on your person a license. So any type of moving violation is going to start with an officer asking for a license and registration. Now, a title, so the two terms, title and registration, what I want you to know for the midterm coming up, that an ownership of a vehicle is something that needs to be titled. And a title fee is roughly run around $25. And when you purchase a vehicle, it will be listed under the name of the person that purchased the vehicle, going through Craigslist, going through private sale. You're going to have the previous owner's title assigned over to you. If it's a new vehicle, as it says here, an auto dealership, they're going to sign over the manufacturer certificate to you, and now you become the proud owner of a vehicle. Now, what a title basically looks like is like what we have up here, is that it has a front side which will detail all the vital information about your vehicle, the make, the model, the year, the VIN number, things that we have been talking about. But on the back side, if you're buying a used vehicle, it's really important for you to understand that, read the information, know what the odometer reading is, make sure that the owner signs at the appropriate place to sell the vehicle. Because if you screw it up and you don't do the top third, right where it says owner's previous owner signature and your signature, and you do something in the middle, or you look at a different line where it says ownership or purchaser or whatever, you may not be doing it correctly and it's going to be void, and you're going to have to make out for another title. So make sure that you have a basic understanding. Um, Even after this class, if you still don't understand it and you're buying a used vehicle, I imagine you're going to probably do it with a parent, so they're going to talk you through this. But later in life, there's so much information that you can get on Google and on the internet. You just don't want to screw this up. New residents are given 60 days to register a vehicle. The thing I want you to understand about registration, every vehicle in New Hampshire has to be registered yearly. Now, a title is only done once. It's when you purchase the vehicle or when you sell the car. But registration needs to be done every single year. And in your notes, I need you to write down, you should go to your town clerk and pay the residence tax. And then from there, they're going to take you through the steps of actually registering your vehicle. Now, this is what a registration looks like. Um, a registration is based upon your title. And registration, what I want you to realize is that the cost of registration differs according to the year your car was made, the value of your vehicle. So it's not going to be the same. Now, when I've had students tell me that they're going to be purchasing, um, when you go to register your vehicle, if what happens is that the cost is based upon the engine size and the value of your vehicle. Now, license plates are given out just roughly from a big box. If you want to have any type of um, license plate that has a um, a meaning or a word, you're going to have to make some type of um, application to get a vanity plate. Now, anything, also write down your notes, anything that has a license plate, motorcycle, moped, trailers, campers, anything that has some type of um, a license plate also needs to be registered. So when you go to register your vehicle, it's going to be a pretty expensive month for you by having all these vehicles registered. So your parents, it's a bad month. So and registration is done during the owner's birth month. So if your dad has 2 cars, a boat, a snow machine, or whatever, it's going to be a real expensive month for him. So just make sure that that you be nice to your parents on the registration month. So Griffin, Jack, and Barry, could you please refrain from joining this class? I know you probably think that you're probably pretty funny, but you're not really adding anything to this. So I'm asking you politely if you could just leave this group. New Hampshire vehicle inspections during the owner's month is when it needs to be completed. It also has to pass inspection, so make sure that your car uh, has plenty of time, so get it into the dealership early to be looked at. Anything that you're waiting near the end of the month, if it gets to the end of the month and you go to have it inspected, if there's any issues, then it's just not going to pass, and you're going to have problems of actually riding your vehicle. And by law, if it's a safety issue where it's brakes or tires, they can prevent you from driving the vehicle away. So always go to get your car inspected early on in the owner's month of birth. Um, if it passes, you'll get an official sticker and it will be placed on the windshield. There are roughly 2,500 official inspection stations, and the thing you need to realize, it's not a set price. So when you go to register your vehicle, that's set up by the state officials, but inspections, because it's done a lot of times at a private place, they can charge whatever they want, but they have to post what the actual cost is going to be outside of the garage. And it's usually on a white sign with a picture of the old man of the mountain with what the actual cost is. So by law, they have to post that. And by law, anything that needs to be fixed, they need to report to you before they actually fix it. So when you leave your vehicle to be inspected, if it has bad brakes, bad tires, they're not doing the work until they get the okay from you. Okay, if once they get the okay from you, then they're going to do the work. But don't feel because they find something wrong with the vehicle that you're obligated to have it done at that dealership. Uh, we're not going to basically go over everything that they inspect, but here is just a quick list of horns, wipers, defroster, tires. They look at the frame, whether there's rust, the brakes, the windows, steering, exhaust. So there's a lot of items that they take a look at. So don't think you're going to drop it off and just wait in the waiting room and they're going to give it, your car back to you in 15 minutes to a half hour. You're going to probably have to drop it off for an hour or so for them to get all the work done. So you're going to have to plan ahead and make an appointment. And like I said earlier, try to do it earlier on in the month rather than waiting to the very end. So here's a good example of what the actual sign looks like. Here's the price that they've posted. Now, there are two types of inspections. One is dealing with equipment, which is safety. The other is emissions. And if you pass one but don't pass the other, your car still can't be driven away. It can only be driven away if it passes both. Now, if it doesn't pass the emissions, they can give you a temporary sticker because they may have to order a part, or they don't have enough time to do the work. So you could still drive it for a while. I believe they can give you a sticker for up to 10 days, and then you're going to have to come back and actually get the work done. I always like asking for what the cost of these repairs are going to be. If I find that they're too expensive, then I may go someplace else. I ask for my parts back so I know that they've actually done the work. And there's always a chance that it's a minor thing. So your dad, an uncle, a friend could maybe do the work for you and not have the mechanic do it. And if you bring the vehicle back, then they should be able to put a sticker right on it. So go someplace that you know is reputable. So look for a AAA designation. Ask for recommendations from friends, anybody that will steer you the right way. Because when it comes to automobiles, and if you do not know anything mechanically, it's very easy for people to take advantage of you. And I've known over the years where mechanics have sometimes added like $100, $200 worth of work to be done on a vehicle that actually didn't really need to be done. So you don't want to be taken. And it's very easy to be taken if you don't know anything about cars. Once you pass your inspection, then they're going to put that red sticker on your vehicle, and they don't put it up near the Easy Pass anymore. They put it in the bottom left corner of your windshield, and then you have to take your registration stickers, which is on the top of the license plate. It shows April of 2013 when this license plate had its registration stickers put on. But you put your registration stickers on your license plate. So just realize those three components are very vital in owning a car. So we've got titling, so that's purchasing a vehicle. We've got registration, which has to do with putting your vehicle's information into the statewide and really national computer system. And then you've got your inspection, going over the safety items of your vehicle to make sure that it is ready to drive. So those three things I did want you to know about. We didn't have enough time when we started class about 10 days ago, and I wanted to go over it before we got into safety equipment, which would be seatbelts. So let's talk about seatbelts, and it's one of my favorite classes because it's I feel one of the most important things that we can do as we get ready to drive is understanding the whole premise of being in a safe position in our vehicle. And you may say, well, of course, if you put a safety belt on, a seat belt on, or if you have airbags, you're going to be safe. Well, not if you're positioned incorrectly. And having your seat adjusted correctly, having your body at the right point to really get the benefit of an airbag is so important. So if you're a little bit off on any of these things, these items are not going to be utilized effectively. And that's not going to be good for you if you ever have a crash. Now, your parents aren't probably pretty old. I'm pushing 60. In July, I will turn the big 6-0. This is what it looked like when I was growing up, when I was a toddler. This is how parents carted their kids around if they didn't hold them in their seat. And it was very common for young children this age to be held by a parent or a sibling in the back seat while the car was moving. So over the years, we have come a long way of making sure that the cars are built correctly and have all the safety features that will maximize their effectiveness if we're ever involved in a crash. Now, these are statistics that have come nationally, and they do kind of break them down statewide. So I want to kind of go over a few things. And before I get into too much of some of these statistics, I do want you to take a look at your um, sheet that I gave you on the information that we're going to be covering. So tonight, your homework is a project, and the project's going to be a poster, a video, or a radio ad. And it has to do with getting the message of using your seatbelt, being in a vehicle with an airbag or having a helmet on, anything to do with safety. I want you to try to persuade people, and that's what the media does, is trying to persuade people, give them information, make them start to think about why they do what they do to change behavior. So your project is going to be based around seatbelts, airbags, and helmets. So some of these statistics you may want to include in your project. So the first one that I want to mention is that young people ages 18 to 24 are less likely to wear a seatbelt than the older age group. Once you get beyond what is recommended and required by the law, so it's the law in New Hampshire to be belted or seat belted up to the age of 18. Once you turn 18, you're an adult, then it's totally up to you. New Hampshire is one of the few states that doesn't have a mandatory seatbelt law for all ages, just for minors. Men are less likely to wear seatbelts than women. And we can kind of probably think that guys are in a hurry, they don't think they're effective, they're not going to be involved in a crash. All these statements have been mentioned by people. They don't want to, mess up their clothes. They're only going a short distance. I'm never going to be involved in a crash. All these things come up when they do any type of a survey. In a metropolitan area, adults who live in non-metropolitan areas, so that would be us in New Hampshire, are less likely to wear seatbelts than those that are, because we think more traffic lights, more cars, higher speeds on highways in the city, maybe it's a good idea to wear a seatbelt, and that's usually the case. But on back roads, speeds of 30, 35, it's amazing how many people don't wear their seatbelt. The next slide here is I want you to take a look at the color codes of most of these states and look at the lightest colored states. So that's New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Virginia. It looks like Arkansas. Then you've got Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota. All these states have the lowest use of seatbelts, which is there's less light colored states than there are brighter green states. So it looks like we're making some progress. And I know this is an older graph. This is through the CDC. They didn't have anything when I looked probably about 6-7 months ago putting this together. They didn't have anything more current than this, at least not that I could find, making a search. Now, I want you to write down primary and secondary. A primary traffic law means that you could be stopped for any moving violation and get a ticket. A secondary traffic law means that you have to be stopped for something else, and then if they find that you don't have your seatbelt on, then it becomes your second ticket. I don't know if that makes sense to you, okay? So think about this again. A primary traffic law means that if you run a stop sign, run a traffic light, you go too fast, drinking and driving, those are all primary. You do that, you're going to get arrested, you're going to get a ticket, you're going to lose your license. So that's primary. A secondary means that there has to be something else that took place prior or with the infraction of a secondary offense. So in some states, distracted driving. They can't pull you over unless you were doing something else wrong. Here they said seatbelt violations, secondary in some states. Instruction on your learner's permit. When you get your license for 6 months, you can only have one non-relative. So if you had two, you'd be breaking a law, but that's not a primary law. That's a secondary law. All right. So if they pull you over and they see that you don't have your seatbelt on and you've got three people in the back, and you've only had your license for 2 months, you're getting a lot of tickets. They can write you up for everything. So just remember that every state is a little bit different. So some states it could be primary, sometimes it could be secondary. Or sometimes you may say, well, I don't have to wear a seatbelt because it's only a secondary, but when you drive across state lines, now you're in a state where it's a primary, now it's a big issue. They basically estimate that we could cut deaths by half if everybody wore a seatbelt. That they also estimated in 2016 that 15,000 people would have survived their injuries. And as I said earlier, I don't want to be, talking about, death and, serious injuries, but it happens in a car. It shouldn't, but it does. And anything that we can do to prevent that, that's what we're trying to do here, is to persuade you, to make you realize that you're taking on a big responsibility getting behind the wheel of the car, not only for you, but your passengers and for other people out on the roadway. And surprisingly, when you see a police officer, what's your first reaction? Is to slow down. Okay, you want to slow down. So they're trying to go out and enforce these laws. They don't want anything happen to people. So we may look down on police officers that they're not giving us a break or whatever. And I hope that they would give you a warning first before they write you out a ticket. But they are out there trying to persuade the driving public to drive better and to drive safely. What is happening through the states is that they're putting out patrols and setting up these digital signs, the LED signs that are on the side of the highway, to make people start thinking about what they're doing, whether it be distracted driving, seatbelt use, drinking and driving. So a lot of money is going towards this education of keeping it in the forefront to people when they drive. So hopefully, like your poster, will do that type of thing. And actually, I don't know if I've got one right here. Let me see, let me get out of here so you can see what a poster. Let me get out of here. Here's a poster that someone did from the last class. This is what I'm looking for. Do you want to end up like this? In 2016, seatbelts saved almost 15,000 lives. Okay, wear your seatbelt. 3/4 people were ejected from their car, died from injuries. So I'm sure that's Photoshop, but it's still pretty cool. I thought the graphics were pretty cool too. So that's what I'm looking for. So it can be hand drawn. It could be Photoshop like this, anything to persuade people to change. Um, let's take a look at New Hampshire for a moment. In New Hampshire, motor vehicle deaths from 2003 to 2012, 919 motor vehicle occupants were killed in New Hampshire. So we're looking at roughly a 9-year period. We are well below the national average. And we see here at the middle that men, as we said earlier, by population, are less likely to wear a seatbelt. Deaths by males, 9.4 nationally, 7.3 New Hampshire wise, 4.7 nationally, and then 2.2 percentage for women. In New Hampshire, we can see that 69% wear seatbelts. Look what the national, way higher than us. That's a great stat. That'd be a great stat to have in a poster. 69% wear safety belts, and then 86% nationally. So we're way, way below what we need to be. What is happening? I got this from a news article not too long ago, indicating that New Hampshire is looking at changing the law. They're looking at making it a primary offense. So the bill would assess a $50 fine for drivers and $25 for adult passengers not wearing seatbelts. So here they're making a difference between, or charging a difference between front seat or passenger. But what they're trying to do is to lessen the fatality rate. And it could, it could change. And this was back last February, I think, when I got this from the paper. I think it was from the Concord Monitor. But it was a pretty close vote, 10-9. Okay, and it sends it to for review. So it's very close of passing. Now, one of the things about being in your vehicle, it's always much safer to be in your vehicle than to be outside of your vehicle. And being thrown from a vehicle is only happening if you're not in your seatbelt. You cannot basically be in a seatbelt, get in a car crash, and then get thrown from your vehicle. The seatbelts don't malfunction like that. Okay, so you're staying within the protection of your vehicle. In a seatbelt or without a seatbelt, as long as the doors are locked, the windows are up, you're not going to get thrown. But with a window, with the doors unlocked, with you not being in your seatbelt, being thrown from a car is possible. So if you do not want to see someone being thrown from a vehicle, you could basically turn away. This is actually a picture, I think, over in Europe of a car that crosses the center line, hits someone, and you can see that they're being thrown from a vehicle. So look away if you don't want to see it. So here we've got a car with a dash cam. The crash is going to happen on the other side. So that's where they're following too close. There's the crash. Now, if you look up in the sky, there's the person being thrown from the vehicle. So nothing on your side of the road, although someone being thrown could actually end. But look at the debris. Look how bad the debris is. So you just never know. You never know when you're driving what's going to happen. So that's a person being thrown from a vehicle. I do want you to write this down. Just because you have a seatbelt on doesn't mean that you're not going to hit the dash, that you're not going to hit the steering column. Now, with airbags, the likelihood that it's not going to happen. But the other thing you need to remember is that airbags only come out once. Once you put your seatbelt on, it's with you the entire time. So think about this. If you get hit head on and your car is spun around, it could get hit a second or third time. So no more airbags after the initial hit. The seatbelts will help you on the second and the subsequent hits. So when you get hit, and now this is based on only going 30 miles per hour, so you're not going very fast, your head is going to go about 1.9 feet. Your chest is going to go about 1.3 feet, and then your pelvis going about 1.2. So notice the number gets lower, probably because you're sitting down, you've got the waist seatbelt. There is some slack to the shoulder harness, so that's why the body is still pivoting, moving forward a little bit. But it's also at 30 miles per hour. If we were going at a faster rate of speed, then these numbers would be a little bit higher. And it's only based upon, it would be less distance if you weighed less. It would probably be a little bit more if you weighed more. So there's a lot of factors that go in. And the other thing I want you to, and we're going to see this in a video in a little bit, is that before a car goes to production, they have to test it, and they have to test it with crash dummies. So the dummies take the brunt of all these crashes and impact before humans ever have to feel what it's like, because we don't do experimentation on humans in cars. So we get to see how far the body is actually moving. And depending on where the impact is, scientists can basically formulate what type of injury is going to be happening inside a vehicle. Now, I'm going to show you a video that, it's a little bit technical. It gets into biology, gets into physics a little bit, but I really like how it explains what happens in a car crash. So I want you to write this down. There are 3 types of crashes or collisions that happen. Every time a car is hit, there are 3 contacts that is happening within the vehicle. It's just not hitting another car. It's more involved than that. And if we take a look at each type of crash or collision that's happening, we can start to understand how we can change things and have a better outcome. So let me show you this little clip. Actually, it's not too little.
Why is it that some spectacular race car crashes produce only minor injuries? How can 3 collisions occur in this one crash between a car and a wall? The answers are determined by the laws of nature and can best be explained when physics meets biology. Through injury biomechanics, the study of the effects of forces on the human body, we've learned much about what happens in high-speed race car crashes, and doctors and engineers have used this information to build safer race cars and tracks. In a similar way, the study of injury biomechanics and crash testing has helped us learn what happens to the human body in passenger car crashes, and what works and doesn't work to reduce injuries and deaths in real-world crashes.
Hi, I'm Griff Jones. I'm a science teacher, and I'm here at the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety's Vehicle Research Center to explore the basic science behind injuries in vehicle crashes. So let's go behind the scenes and take a closer look at what happens to the human body in a crash. What is the first scientific discipline that comes to mind when you think of car crashes? It's probably physics, right? Because Newton's laws of motion govern what happens to a vehicle in a crash. But if we want to understand how crashes cause injuries to people, we need to look at what occurs when physical forces are applied to organs, tissues, and cells. This happens when physics meets biology in a field called injury biomechanics.
The Institute's Vehicle Research Center is a world-class facility for vehicle research and testing. A reporter described the crash hall with its 3 runways as a cross between a Hollywood soundstage and a NASA clean room. Vehicles are propelled down the runways at precise speeds, using a system of nitrogen-powered hydraulic motors and cables. The lighting array provides up to 750,000 watts of non-glare illumination for the 500 frames per second high-speed cameras. The research tests they're conducting here today focuses on how injuries occur in real-world crashes. This experimental crash replicates one in which a car hit a tree. In an attempt to understand injury patterns found in the occupants of the actual crash, researchers have disconnected the airbags.
Looking at the driver's chest, we can see the chest deflection reached about 50 millimeters of compression. The chest acceleration sees 70 to 80 G resultant acceleration range. High likelihood of skull fracture.
Very bad.
Yeah, very bad.
Figuring out what just happened in this test crash is the job of the research engineers here. Using sophisticated tools like instrumented crash test dummies, instrumentation in the car, and slow-motion film, they can analyze every detail and construct a precise picture of exactly what the vehicle and the occupants went through.
When research engineers use terms like the chest deflection reached about 50 millimeters, how does that relate to what a human occupant would experience? If chest acceleration is 70 to 80 Gs, which means that a force equivalent to 70 to 80 times the weight of the dummy's chest is pressing on it, is that survivable? How do these guys know the answers?
The search for the limits of human tolerance to forces began decades ago.
Today's race car and passenger car drivers benefit from biomechanics studies that were conducted during the 1940s, 50s, and 60s in the field of aviation. investigating how to protect pilots and astronauts from the strenuous forces of ejections and high-speed travel. Colonel John Stapp, a medical doctor and biophysicist in the United States Air Force, used himself as the test subject in his investigations of human tolerance to high G environments.
From the outside, watch the breakneck stop.
In one of his many tests, Dr. Stapp reached a speed of 632 miles per hour before one of the most powerful braking systems of all time stopped him in 1.4 seconds, subjecting him to more than 40 times the pull of gravity, or 40 Gs. His research helped establish the limits of human tolerance to high G environments and saved many lives through development and improvement of protective systems for ejection seats. Realizing the Air Force lost nearly as many men to car crashes as they did to plane crashes, Dr. Stapp began a car crash program using the rocket sled for seatbelt experiments. Human volunteers working with his biophysics research team endured as many as 28 Gs during safety belt tests. This early research laid the foundation for the complex crash analysis that is conducted here today. These dummies are a perfect example of combining science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to produce new tools that extend scientific understanding. They are the modern-day version of Dr. Stapp's volunteers. There's not just one dummy for VRC testing, nor even one type. There's a whole family of dummies for crash testing.
This is our crash test dummy family, ranging from a 6-month-old all the way up to a 95th percentile male.
95th percentile of what?
That means that it is larger than 95% of the male population in the U.S.
Wow, so this is a big guy.
Yes, if he could stand, he would be about 6'2", about 223 pounds, pretty big. The female, if she could stand, about 5 foot tall, 107 pounds.
How about the smaller dummies?
They're called crabbies.
Crabbies. Are they moody?
They're not moody, but it stands for child restraint airbag interaction.
And so when we're doing the frontal crash test, it's 50th percentile?
Yes.
Okay. Side impact is the small female.
Side impact dummy is a very complicated dummy. It has the most instrumentation. They have sensors from the head to the toe. The accelerometers give us the acceleration of the mass. The load cell measures force. And then we have the potentiometers that measure the displacement. The ribs actually move.
So dummies are very sophisticated. They provide data from many different body regions. But how do we connect this to people? What is the link between all these crash test data and the injuries that people experience in real-world crashes?
The dummy's measuring different things. It's measuring acceleration, force, and in some cases distortion of the body parts. Those measurements can be compared against similar measurements made in experiments on biological tissues, using either animal models or cadaver models to get an idea of how much stress can this body part take before it breaks. So in order to understand whether or not a person would be injured, you need to know how strong the bones are, how strong the tissues are, and what conditions will cause them to break.
So the crash test dummies try to get a clearer picture of what's really happening to the people. Is that where the term biofidelity comes from?
It's exactly where the term biofidelity comes from. What biofidelity means is the characteristic of the dummy that represents how close to actually being a human being it is. So the higher the biofidelity, the more like a human being it is in representing how it moves, what types of stresses it measures in the crash test, and then the true-to-lifeness of those measurements to the prediction of injuring a real person.
This is how research engineers can tell us with precision what a human occupant would have experienced in a test crash. Dr. Stapp's experiments, plus years of research with real biological tissues from cadavers and animals, have produced a set of reference values against which we can compare the stresses and strains the dummies experience. So we can measure these in a test crash and can figure out if they would cause injury to a human occupant. But what do these stresses and strains actually do to people to cause injury? Let's start with some basic anatomy. Your body contains over 100 trillion cells and is structurally organized into 4 levels: cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems. Tissue is a group of similar cells working together to perform a common function. Organs are made up of 2 or more types of tissue working together to perform a specific function.
and each organ is part of at least one organ system that performs major activities or processes. Your body contains 4 fluid-filled spaces called body cavities that house and protect your major internal organs. Within the body cavities, your organs are suspended in fluid that supports their weight and prevents them from being deformed by normal movements. Your organs are also protected by your bones and muscles. For example, your heart and lungs are protected by your rib cage and sternum inside the thoracic cavity. Your brain is encased within your cranial cavity and is protected by your skull. Now, with this as background, remember the question from the beginning of this film. How is it possible to have 3 collisions in a single crash? Remember, the laws of physics hold true everywhere. On a highway, on a racetrack, and even inside your body. If a race car is going 200 miles per hour, so is the driver's body and every organ inside it. Let's answer the question. The first collision is between the car and the wall. The second is between the driver and the car's interior. And the third is between the driver's internal organs and the inside walls of his or her body cavities.
Tell me a little bit more about the injury.
To help us understand more about what happens to organs in the third collision, let's meet Dr. Stephen Olvey, a neurocritical care physician and director of the Neuroscience Intensive Care Unit at the University of Miami's Jackson Memorial Hospital.
Basically, during a crash, you have 3 collisions. You have the initial crash of the vehicle.
Then you have the occupant hitting something inside the car and coming to a sudden stop.
This results in impacts inside the body. For example, the lungs can hit the inside of the rib cage, the heart can hit the breastbone or inside of the rib cage, resulting in either pulmonary contusion or myocardial contusion. This is what causes ruptured spleens, lacerated livers, because you have part of the organ well anchored and the other part is free to move about. And this causes a shearing force to take place in the organ, resulting in hemorrhage or tearing of the tissue. The brain is enclosed in a rigid case, the skull, and it's cushioned and surrounded by the cerebrospinal fluid. The cerebrospinal fluid is actually a different density than the brain itself, so in the event of an impact to the skull, the brain begins to move, the cerebrospinal fluid begins to move, but it moves at a different rate than the brain. So it will actually displace the brain in the opposite direction of the initial impact to the brain.
This simple experiment helps illustrate the phenomenon. This represents your skull. There's water inside representing your cerebrospinal fluid, and the red gel is your brain. The gel floats because it's less dense than water, just like your brain is less dense than your cerebrospinal fluid.
What do you think will happen to the brain during impact? Will it move forward, backward, or stay in the same spot? Let's see. The initial movement of the brain is toward the back of the skull. The more dense cerebrospinal fluid moves toward the side of the skull impact, displacing the brain in the opposite direction. If the impact is strong enough, the brain will initially impact the back wall of the skull, then rebound and hit the front of the skull.
This type of injury is called the coup contre coup, which is a French term meaning blow against blow. The order of events inside the skull is still debated in the medical community. Whether the more dense fluid displaces the brain in the opposite direction first, or whether the brain moves in the direction of the initial impact first and then is displaced by a wave of spinal fluid, is not yet fully understood. By the way, this simple experiment was designed by a high school student for her science fair project. It was later published in a medical journal and has contributed to the debate. Crash injuries occur when stress develops in tissue. Another way this happens is when one part of the tissue or organ is firmly attached to the torso and another part is free to move. For example, with the heart and its blood vessels, the ascending aorta and its arch are mobile, while the descending aorta is fixed. Here's a demonstration of how a sudden stop, like a third collision, can cause an acceleration injury to the aorta. The aortic arch is represented by the unsupported gel. The gel inside the tube represents the descending aorta, which is fixed to the body.
Try to predict what will happen during the collision. The unsupported section of gel continues forward and tears away from the supported gel. During an actual collision, the fixed descending aorta will decelerate along with the body, while the arch and ascending aorta's momentum keep them moving forward. This difference in acceleration or deceleration causes a tear where the fixed and mobile parts meet. Even the inertia of a blood-filled heart can cause stress and strain on the aortic arch.
We've been talking about stress and strain on tissues and organs, and we've seen how a crash applies some of these forces. But what is stress and strain in this context?
Stress is a measure of the average deforming force exerted over a defined area of tissue. Stress produces strain, which is a measure of how much the tissue deforms as a result of the stress.
This special gel has elastic properties similar to certain human tissue, but not all human tissue is of equal strength. Forces and pressures on the outside of your body cause stress within your tissue. Three basic types of stress are tensile stress from stretching, shearing stress from opposing forces, and compressive.
Okay, what I'd like you to do, and I know that it was kind of a longer video, but they talked about 3 different types of collisions. So just to make sure that you are here and that you are participating, there were 3 types of collisions in the crash. I want you to explain to me in a text what were those 3 collisions, and then we're going to go over that. While you do that, let me just put that right here. I wanted to add one more clip. Let me get out of here for a second. There was an airbag video that I wanted to show you, and that's if I can find it. And I did not get it. There it is. There we go.
The car is king. In the last 30 years, the number of cars on the road has trebled, and more cars means more accidents. 20 million people around the world are injured in road accidents every year, and over 1 million.
Most cars, as you could see from the last video, are supposed to be built to be able to withstand impact around 35, 40 miles per hour. Cars nowadays aren't going to pass the Car Institute, the Insurance Institute safety test like we just saw here to get a car into production unless it's going to be able to handle speeds up to 35, 40 miles per hour. So if a car is deemed safe at that point, then it's going to go into mass production. Now, there have been recalls where maybe some of the metal that they used wasn't of best quality. Maybe there were some bolts missing, whatever, and there could be a recall on a vehicle. But all cars come with a safety rating, and we may do this later at the end of the program, is to find out how safe is your car. And your car insurance is based upon how well it will protect you, partly. So it's just not you driving, whether you're a good driver or a bad driver, will you be involved in a crash? But when you buy car insurance, they basically take a look at the vehicle that you're driving, and they know that the vehicle that you're driving is going to withstand most car crashes with an impact to prevent serious injury or death. And that's important, and that's going to keep you safe, and it's going to keep your insurance rates down. So people are starting to text in, which is kind of good, and I see a lot of correct answers. And at the end of tonight's class, we will talk about that. Now let's talk about airbags. That's what I just downloaded. I don't know why I didn't put that video into tonight's queue, but I had forgotten all about it. If you take a look at the diagram, an airbag will only deploy, so write this down in your notes, will only deploy if the impact is at 15 miles per hour or higher. So if you're hitting another car in a parking lot, you're going 8 miles per hour, it's going to be bumper to bumper, no airbag. Once you hit that 15 mile an hour speed limit, then the airbag's going to deploy. So there are sensors right near the bumper on either side, right and left, that will activate the whole process of the airbag being deployed. So the sensor is activated. It goes up to a module that's in the steering column or near the glove compartment if they're a passenger. Now we've got airbags that are on the side, and we've got them on the roof for SUVs. It's going to activate all the airbags. So if the sensor since it's in the front right, front left, and those are the only places we have sensors. We do not have them in the rear of our car. So if you get hit from behind, airbags do not get deployed until your car gets pushed into another car. Now, side, okay, that's a different story. Okay, they will be activated. Then you have the airbag, and we're going to take a look from the video in a moment how that is basically built, because you've got to have the air come out at the right speed, and then it's got to deflate at the right amount of time, or else it's going to do some internal damage to your face and to your body. So we've got to make sure that airbags are built correctly. And some car manufacturers have had a difficult time with airbags. They've put them into production, and then they had to have a recall, and they had to put new ones in because they weren't doing an adequate job of helping people. And that's a good thing about recalls, is that they, after a few complaints, we can get people back into the dealership and fix those problems, so we don't have to continue to have people drive around in cars that are a little bit faulty. So let's take a look at, and this is a little bit of an older video, but it does really kind of go over how airbags are made and how they work.
The car is king. In the last 30 years, the number of cars on the road has trebled, and more cars means more accidents. 20 million people around the world are injured in road accidents every year, and over 1 million people are killed. That's equivalent to the entire population of Barcelona. But amazingly, although the number of accidents is going up, the number of deaths is actually going down. In the past 30 years, they've reduced by half, thanks in large part to one ingenious device, the airbag. The idea of an airbag seems simple enough, but in fact it's an incredibly sophisticated mechanism. From the moment of collision, the airbag has only 50 thousandths of a second to inflate and stop the driver being hurled through the windscreen. That's a quarter of the time it takes for a hummingbird's wing to beat once. But that's not all. If it doesn't then deflate within just 0.2 of a second, the airbag itself might kill the driver. So how do you get an airbag to inflate at supersonic speed? How do you prevent a solid airbag from killing the person it's supposed to protect? And how do they know when to go off? How do they do it? Vårgårda in western Sweden is the home of Autoliv, the world's leader in airbag technology and production. It makes airbags for almost every car on the international market. 3.5 million of them each year. But the designers and manufacturers aren't the only heroes at Autoliv. Hidden away is a team of specialists without whose sacrifice airbag development would be impossible. Deep in the heart of the building, a dedicated band of operatives do their job without any thought for their own personal safety. Without moaning, this lot will take everything thrown at them. Ouch. It's a pity to treat them so roughly, because these dummies are themselves massively complicated machines, costing a staggering $180,000 each. These things are like cyborgs. Inside them is a complex metabolism which mimics all the key functions and characteristics of the human body: skeleton, organs, nerves, even veins and arteries. And they're also crammed with thousands of sensors to record and relay exactly what happens to a human body in a serious car accident. It's even worse when you can see what's coming. Oh! Thanks to these dummies, Autoliv have designed a range of rapid inflation airbags that have reduced fatalities amongst seatbelt wearers by 25%. But how do these bags inflate at such terrific speed? The secret is to have a bomb in your car, more specifically, in your steering wheel. Airbags are essentially a combination of sensor, ignition system, explosive device, and nylon balloon. The bomb really is a bomb. The blast is achieved by a controlled ignition of high explosives which are packed in the form of pellets, and the force of the blast pushes air into the balloon at incredible speed. Different vehicles demand different airbags, and their design is improving all the time. For each new design, a 3D virtual model is produced, and from this, a prototype is created. The nylon balloon is made by a combination of precision laser cutting and machine stitching. Before the crash test dummies can be exposed to the airbag itself has to be tested. A steel weight is driven into the steering wheel to ensure the bag can repel the force of the average body at over 40 kilometers per hour. Once the test is completed, any faults are modified by design technicians. Lives depend on the design of these airbags, so every aspect is examined again and again and again. The problem they found here is that the airbag doesn't deflate quickly enough. In a crash, such a simple design fault could cause a driver's neck to snap like a dried-out breadstick. So a solution is found.
Okay, my proposal is that we increase the size of the ventilation hose by, I think, like 30%. Okay. What do you think about that?
Yeah, sounds good.
After modifications have been made, it's back to the stitching room to create the new design. Once this is complete, it's time for the final test to take place. At last, the crash test dummies are allowed out to play. But this is no Sunday afternoon drive in the country, as they're about to find out. They're lowered into position and their sensors are checked. Autoliv makes $320 million worth of airbags every year, and they can't afford for one to go wrong. In theory, this new design works, but will the airbags save a life in practice? It's a critical moment, and it's over in the blink of an eye.
3, 2, 1, 0.
Success. Our Terminator friend lives to fight another day, and the airbag moves on to the next stage of development. It's vital that the airbag doesn't go off randomly, or when a frustrated driver punches the steering wheel. The problem is to get it to fire at the right time. So how does an airbag know when to go off?
There is a sensor on the left side, here, 10 centimeter in, and another one here, and 10 centimeter in here.
In the event of a crash, these sensors relay information instantly to a central control box inside the car.
And then the signal goes from the box here up to the airbag, and you have a deployment. And all these things are happen in a fraction of a second.
But even when the sensors activate the airbag at the correct moment, there's another problem. The airbag is housed in plastic. The explosion could cause potentially lethal shards to be blown around the car, killing or maiming passengers and ripping the airbag itself. The ingenious solution is only visible at 1,000 frames per second. Each airbag compartment has a front section that is slightly weakened by a series of minute holes, too small to be seen. This weakened casing then ruptures during a collision, allowing the airbag to expand, but ensuring the plastic stays in place. At this speed, we can also see how the ventilation holes enable the airbag to deflate rapidly to save the driver from head and neck injuries. So, following extensive tests, the airbag can finally go into production on this assembly line. The finished airbags have the explosive device added. This is then bolted into place. The airbag is automatically folded before being fitted in its housing. This housing is then placed within the steering wheel compartment. And another airbag is ready to make another driver that much safer.
I'm very proud. I know that each day by working here, I save life out in the traffic. And during 1 year, we probably save 15,000 lives. That's a good thing.
Finally, spare a thought for those selfless, smashed-up cyborgs. For them, every day is an accident waiting to happen.
That's probably more information that you probably ever thought that you would get about airbags. But hopefully it gives you a better perspective of the technology that has to go in every little item that we have in a vehicle to keep us safe. And this, as you can tell by the quality of the video, it's got to be at least 20 years old. I mean, the idea of having an airbag has been around for a long, long time, since the 70s. So it's almost approaching 50 years. But because of the added cost, and now remember, we said that the airbag comes out at speeds of 15 miles per hour. You're not doing a lot of damage at 18 miles per hour. You're walking out of the vehicle and, going to school and going home. You're going to walk away from that crash, and you could probably even drive your car away. But to get another airbag installed in your vehicle, well over $1,000. So these little minor, 18-mile-an-hour crashes can be quite costly. So be very careful when an airbag comes out and think it's going to be a simple solution to get them. You don't stuff them back in. You got to have a whole new unit, as we saw, to put into the vehicle. Two terms here I want you to write down. When it comes to safety, the two terms that I want you to be familiar with is passive and active. Passive means they're automatic. There's nothing that you have to do but to purchase a vehicle that has airbags. I mean, it's simple. You get into a car, you don't even think about it. We know that airbags are in every car now. So we just drive a car. We know if we don't have our seatbelt on, that we're going to have some protection. But really, to utilize the airbag to its optimum level of safety, a seatbelt has to be on, and a seatbelt is an active. Manually, you have to put a seatbelt on, and that is the problem that we're having. And this is why a lot of states are going to mandatory seatbelt laws, is because people don't think it's important and don't think that your rights are being impeded upon. Now, I know we live in the state of live free or die, but I want you to think about this, is that your insurance rates are based upon statistics. So when a lot of people are involved in crashes and they get injured or they die, that affects you, even if you are a person that uses a seatbelt, because seatbelt usage will drive down the injuries and death rates, and insurance rates don't go up. Insurance rates go up when insurance companies have to pay more money. They have to recoup losses that they've had over the years. So if people's driving gets worse, insurance rates get higher. When people are better drivers, your insurance rates go down. And just not the way that you drive, but how other people drive in the state that you live in. And by the way, insurance, we're going to have a whole class on insurance, is based upon individual states. So even though you're the same age, driving the same vehicle, when you move to another state, so let's say right now in the month of March, let's just say your insurance is $1,200, driving a particular car that you have at home. You move to, let's say Connecticut. It's going to go up. And insurance rates in Connecticut are much higher than New Hampshire. And you're the same person, same car, but you're in a different state. But we're going to get into insurance. And we'll talk about child restraints too. But so passive is you don't have to do anything. Active means that you've got to do something in the car to make sure that these devices are actually going to work. The only thing I want you to write down here that I've got up here when we're talking about airbags, make sure that if it's a young person, that they're at least 12. They've got to be large enough to have the height and the weight to benefit from an airbag. If they're too short or too light, the airbag's going to probably do more harm than good. The other thing that I want you to write down is you should be at least 10 inches away from the steering wheel. I don't have anybody in this class that gets too close. But if you are too close, you're going to have some issues with an airbag coming out. With that type of force, you're bound to break a nose, do some bruising. And conversely, if you're back too far, you're not going to get the full benefit of the airbag. So that's why I like you grabbing the steering wheel at 10 and 2, 9 and 3, and having a slight bend to your elbow. If you are too short, it makes sense, and it says here, to have some type of a wedge cushion that will help you sit up straight and close enough to the steering wheel. But I don't think we have anybody in this class that has that problem. And we talked about airbags being on the side and all over inside a vehicle. Now, the more expensive your car, the better your safety features. The less expensive, the older the car, you're not going to either have them or they're not going to be as good as the more expensive vehicles. So don't scrimp. Don't try to save money on buying a car that doesn't have airbags and safety equipment. And now we've got a lot of different types of safety equipment in a car. How many of you, and you can put this up in the comment section here at YouTube. You don't have to text me this one. But how many of you, when you were younger, or maybe you still do it right now, how many of you know, or how many of you have had your feet on the dash while somebody's been driving? And as we saw in the video about airbags, the airbags are being deployed at extremely high rate of speeds, 100 to 220 miles per hour. And what would happen if your airbag came out and you had your feet on the dash? This is what would happen. Look at this girl. Look at that forehead. Okay, she's had surgeries. I'm sure there's brain trauma. I don't think that she's probably in the exact same shape she was prior to the crash. I don't think anybody should have to live through that. I'm not going to go through proper position with the seatbelt. We do that when we're in the car. Basically, just keep your seatbelt where you have your belt, where you have your waistband. Women that are pregnant, this is important, not now, but when you get older, for the ladies in class, you've got to have it where it's supposed to be below the belly so it doesn't do damage to a child. And it doesn't have to be a crash. It could be a sudden stop. If you've got the seatbelt kind of on your belly button, which is kind of high if you're pregnant, there's going to be some type of discomfort and trauma to the child. So you're having it very, very low. And basically think of your hip bones. If you have your seatbelt on your hip bones, you've got it in a position, and you want to basically pull on it just a little bit to make sure that it's kind of tight and taut. All right. Head restraints should always meet the back of the lower ear level. The term that we're going to see, and I don't know if we'll get to the end of it tonight, but the term that I want you to be familiar with is called ramping. Ramping is when your head goes over the back of the seat. And that's where you're stretching all the muscles, but we'll talk about that at the end. I'm not going to go through the myths. I think we know the myths. Let's talk a little bit about kids. They should be at least 40 inches tall to have a harness on. Now, just think about it. You don't have a tape measure. Okay, 36 inches is a yardstick, so they're a little bit bigger than a yardstick. Put it this way: if they're outside of the vehicle, if they're below where the window is, they're too small. If their head pops up above the window, then they could probably wear a shoulder harness. That's the best way to do it. A child less than 6 years old, less than 55 inches in height, should be properly fastened and secured to a child passenger restraint. We'll see that in a video in a minute. And anyone under 18, of course, in New Hampshire has to be in a seatbelt. Now, I know some of you have younger siblings. Once you get your license, you're going to be the new taxi driver. So you're going to have to make sure that your brother or sister is in the right seat and fastened correctly, or else you're going to get stopped and you're going to have problems with having a ticket. And it can get quite expensive. It used to be $500 per child, but I believe it's gone down to right around $100. But when that first came out, many years ago, I knew a dad that he had two kids, and he had a Jeep, and they were back of the Jeep Wrangler. And that's why the police could see that they weren't in their seatbelts. I don't know why he didn't have them in their seatbelt, but he had $1,000 fine. Two kids, $500 a piece. Yeah, pretty expensive. Yeah, you don't want that to happen. So let's take a look at kids and where should they be placed. Remember, you have 3 seatbelts in the back of most cars now. Okay, where do you put them? Where should they be placed? Let's take a look.
More than 1,000 children 12 and under die in car crashes every year, and more than 100,000 are injured. But parents can reduce the risk to their kids if they put them in an appropriate car safety seat that's correctly installed in their vehicle. When a vehicle is moving at 30 miles per hour, so is everything inside it. If the vehicle crashes, unrestrained objects keep moving at their original speed until they strike the vehicle interior. This is why infant and child car seats are so important. They hold child passengers in place as the vehicle's front end does its job of crumpling and absorbing energy. This test demonstrates something parents don't even want to think about: an unprotected infant smashing into the instrument panel. Some parents think it's okay to ride with a child on their lap, but it's not. Crashes happen so fast and are so violent that you can't protect a child this way. Frontal airbags can be especially dangerous. In a crash, an airbag can hit a child or car seat with tremendous force. Even older children shouldn't sit in the front seat. The temptation to play with the radio can put them in harm's way. Children are always safer in the back seat. The basic types of car seats are rear-facing infant seats, forward-facing child seats, convertible seats that can be used either rear or forward-facing, and booster seats for children who've outgrown their forward-facing seat but aren't big enough for adult seat belts. Consider your child's age and size when picking out a car seat, and whether it's compatible with your vehicle's seat and seat belts. Not all car seats will fit well into your vehicle. Proper installation has always been a struggle, but it is getting easier. Since September 2002, passenger vehicles are required to have special anchors, and most car seats have to be made with attachments that fit into them. This system is called latch. Lower attachments mate with anchors in the seat. Anchor points are usually marked. For forward-facing seats, top tethers get attached to anchors on the rear shelf or on vehicle seat backs. Car seats and vehicles without latch are still safe if you use the vehicle's belt system correctly. In order to do this in some vehicles, you may need to use a locking clip. Keep in mind, a car seat that fits easily into one vehicle may not fit very well, if at all, into another. Before you buy a car seat, try it in your vehicle to be sure it's compatible and can be tightly secured. Also, be sure to read the seat and vehicle owner's manuals to make installation go more smoothly. In some communities, you can check the installation at county checking stations, police or fire stations, car dealerships, or hospitals. If you're in a severe crash, inspect your child's car seat. If there's visible damage, you'll need to replace it. Remember, your child's safety is up to you. Always be sure he or she is properly buckled in without fail, every ride.
Okay, a couple things about child restraints. First of all, they will not allow you to leave a hospital unless you have an approved car seat. Okay, they will actually walk you down to your car. They'll walk out the door and make sure that you're putting that child into the car seat correctly. The other thing, as I mentioned before, the video ran, is that we have 3 car seats in the back. 3 seatbelts in the back. If it's an infant and it's a rear-facing, and think about it, why, if it's a child that's 2 months, 3 months old, why face them backwards? Why not have them looking forward? Because, you could take your rearview mirror and tip it down to see if the child still has its pacifier. You could see if it needs a toy or something. Why is it facing backwards? The reason being is because there's so much braking, especially heavy braking, and a child's neck isn't fully developed. So until we know that a child can hold up its head, probably crawl, maybe even walk, put the child facing backwards. And the best position to have a child is directly in the middle. Think about any type of side crash, any type of T-bone type of crash. The impact is being pushed. The side of the vehicle is being pushed by a foot and a half inwards. So the middle area is going to be the most protected in any type of crash. So the middle of your car is the safest place to be. As a child gets older, then you can turn it around, face forward, and I would still put them in the middle. I think the second best place, if you've got multiple kids, let's say that they're all toddlers now. They're like 3, 6, and 9. So where do you put the kids? Well, I always tell people you put your favorite child in the middle, you put your second favorite behind the passenger, and then you put your least favorite kid behind the driver. I'm only kidding, but you've got to remember that the younger you are, the less likely you are to withstand a lot of trauma. So always put the youngest probably in the middle. Who doesn't need to be belted? If you're in a limousine, if you're in a school bus, motorcycle, of course, doesn't have any type of a seatbelt. Antiques don't have them. Okay. And I forgot the year that we started to put seatbelts in. I'll have to look that up. I'll get back to you tomorrow. Kids that are in a special education van with disabilities, they can get some type of a waiver. They don't need to do that. Motorcycle helmet use, very important. New Hampshire is one of the few states that does not make it mandatory to have a helmet. So you do it at your own risk. But if you are a passenger under the age of 18 or a rider under the age of 18, you do need to have your helmet on. Okay? And it should be approved helmet. Don't try to get away with some of these, cheapies. Make sure there's a certification to it that it's actually going to do some help to you. The only thing that we will require in New Hampshire, and you may want to write this down, this might be a good question, I'll put this on the midterm, is that eye protection is for everybody, because that means that you're able to see the road. There's nothing worse than to have no glasses on and to get something stuck in your eye, an insect or something. You're going to be more concerned about cleaning your eye. It's going to make everything blurry. So eye protection is a must. And being in a college town, how many times do we see kids on scooters, even though they're just going around town at 25 miles per hour max speed, getting to their class or getting to the dorm? They need eye protection. Okay, that is a must. They should have that. I thought this was a kind of an ironic article that I found in the paper. A man from New York was in a anti-helmet rally. He didn't want New York to pass a bill making it mandatory to wear a helmet. So there was like 550 motorcycles going down the road. And for whatever reason, one person lost control of their motorcycle. He went over his handlebars, hit his head on the pavement, and he died. I mean, there can't be anything worse for your cause than to have the opposite of what you're protesting. So I thought that was kind of ironic that he was in an anti-motorcycle rally and he dies from not having a helmet on. So let's take a look at how helmets do make a difference.
How helmets work to protect your brain. For every mile traveled in the U.S., motorcyclists are 37 times more likely than drivers to be in a fatal crash. Motorcyclists without helmets are over 3 times more likely to suffer a brain injury. And each year, just in the U.S., about 800 more motorcyclists could have been saved from death by wearing a helmet. Let's first look at how brain injury happens during a motorcycle crash. The skull is like a bus. The different parts of the brain are like passengers right next to each other. Imagine that a school bus hits a wall, smashing right into it. A total mess. The bus is crushed, and the passengers thrown about, everything flying. It's much the same in a direct head impact. A person's head smashes into something, and suddenly there's a mess. Blood everywhere, and inside the skull, torn tissue and broken blood vessels. The damage is obvious. But suppose the bus driver somehow managed a panic stop. The bus looks okay, no damage to the outside, but inside there'd still be a mess. Kids and their stuff everywhere, lots of cuts and bruises. The force from that panic stop would reach inside the bus and rattle the contents, while leaving the bus unmarked. The same has been seen in helmeted head impacts. If a severe impact overwhelms the helmet, the face and skull might look okay. There might be no blood or fractures apparent, but inside, just as with the school bus, there's chaos. There can be stretched and torn neurons, broken blood vessels, and a host of injuries. Bleeding leads to more pressure inside the skull, damaging brain cells. Brain cells do not like to be touched by blood cells directly. These injuries can result in serious health and behavioral problems, and even death. But say the driver is really good. She sees the wall and applies the brakes firmly but carefully. The bus slows to a controlled stop, just short of the wall. But now the kids remain seated and hang on to their books and backpacks. When they get to school, the children can tell their friends and teachers about their close call. It works the same for people wearing good helmets. When the helmet strikes, it stops moving almost immediately. But the helmet's thick inner liner allows the person's head to remain in motion for a while longer. The liner, as it is crushed, applies a controlled braking force to the head to slow it to a gentle stop. So long as the head is stopped before the helmet runs out of liner, the impact is softened to a tolerable limit. A truly protective helmet is constructed with a foam liner to cushion the head and a hard shell to prevent penetration. The hard shell spreads the impact force over a larger area of the liner, just like a thumbtack spreads the pushing force over the thumb. Having a good helmet on your head is like being on the right side of the thumbtack. Ow! The Snell helmet standard for motorcycling is the most stringent in the world. Snell IM 2015 certified helmets protect the brain in both low and high energy impacts and assures you the same head protection enjoyed by most competitive racers. Snell IM 2015 demands all the protective performance currently available to riders.
So this is a good lead into what we saw for the video with seatbelts and the car crashes, the 3 collisions. So let's take a look. Let's see if I can get back here. If I can find my... There it is. There were 3 collisions in a car crash. And it's based on the same principle that we just saw with the helmet, is that we need some type of what we call a ride down. And that's where we're softening the impact. So the first collision was the car to an object or another vehicle to the wall. That is the one that we always think about. We think, oh, look, there was a car crash, down at the intersection of Maple and Oak. And we just think of 2 cars hitting one another. That's the most obvious. But we also have to understand there are 2 other type of collisions. And this is what we're talking about tonight, is that now your body is going to hit the inside of your vehicle. Now remember, you're going to hit it at the same speed. Just like with a helmet, your head is hitting the inside of that helmet at the same speed that you are traveling. So in a seatbelt, we're going to basically, as we said before, as the upper torso goes 1.9 feet, the middle torso goes 1.5, and then down near your waist, 1.2. So it's only moving a little bit. And then the last part is where the airbag comes out. And that's when your organs are hitting the inside of your body cavity. So the 3 is car to car, body to the inside of the car, and then your organs to the inside of your body cavity. So what I want you to think about, how much control do you have hitting another object when you drive? Should have a lot. Okay, if you're a good driver, your parents don't have crashes in a car yearly. They could go decades without being involved in a crash. So car hitting a car, that should not happen. It does, but not that frequently. Now, how much control do you have hitting the inside of your vehicle? You've got some. You've got your seatbelt, you've got your airbag, you've got your seat position. But then the last thing, when your organs hit the inside of your body cavity, you have no control over that. So as you can see, you've got a lot of control at the beginning, and then you're losing some little by little till you have no control over what's happening with your body. And you want to always have the most control. So this is why it's so important to really learn to be a good driver, to be safe, and to know what's happening around you so people aren't hitting you and you're not hitting other people. So that leads us, I don't think we're going to get into ramping. That's the last thing that I wanted to talk about. But I think what we're going to do is I want to give you an example of, I already gave you the example of a poster. Let me give you an example now of a video. So if you do a video, you'll get extra credit on your final. A poster is just your homework. If you do a radio ad, it's just your homework. So if you put the time and effort in, I'll give you extra credit for doing a video. This is what I want you to do. I want you to do 2 facts. Include 2 facts about seatbelts, airbags, helmets, something that you learned tonight, something that you found on the internet that is informational about persuading people to wear seatbelts or helmets or to have airbags in their car. 2 facts, use some graphics, make it colorful. That will be helpful. So here's an example of one of the students' videos that we just had.
I know, I'm moving.
You're always late. You're
I'm sorry that You're just not gonna wear your seatbelt?
I don't need to wear a seatbelt. I'm literally a good...
They did a really good job.
Just as many people die in car accidents because they're not wearing seatbelts.
We literally have to get to school. We're late. You know I'm a good driver. You stop acting so smart.
Bruh, do you hear that? Like, their whole point is to prevent drivers from being ejected from the vehicles during car crashes. You're 30 times more likely to be ejected from a vehicle during a crash if you're not wearing your seatbelt.
So I thought they did a very good job with that. Now, I don't know if this is going to work. This is a radio ad, and I don't know if I can put it in here and play it. I don't know if this works. I don't know if you can. I think I'm going to have to try to put it on. Hold on a second. I'm going to try to put it on. Oh, that's not working. Hold on. Let me try it one more time. Sometimes it's hard to drag these things. No, I'm not getting the radio ad. I'll try to find a different way of showing it for tomorrow. But that was a pretty decent video. So poster, video, or radio ad. So a radio ad, make believe that this is something you would hear on the radio. It's 30 seconds long. Put some statistics, some information about seatbelts, airbags, helmets, and you're good to go. It shouldn't take you too long. You can do it right on your phone and text me or email me. I guess you could email me the file to the radio ad or to the video. Tomorrow, we are going to be covering vision, communication, and turning. 6 and 7, if you don't have a textbook, tomorrow morning I will try to copy those into PDF files for you and read section 5 and 8 out of the state manual. Remember the state manual, if you don't have one, you can download it. So you should be reading along on all these topics. So that takes care of seatbelts, airbags, and helmets and safety equipment. So you guys have a good night, and we'll try to get to driving on Thursday. Lord willing, everything goes well. So have a good night, stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow.